Hi, thanks for joining me. Mindy Mandell here. And this video is on the eighth hypothesis in Plato's Parmenides. So in this dialogue, of course, Parmenides is talking about the one, and he's doing a dialectic on it. And I see his talk can be being broken down into 9 hypotheses. And I think we're about due at this point for a little bit of review. It's been a while since I went through it. And so just to make sure that we all remember how it all breaks down and what is the formal dialectic style that he's following, I want to do a little bit of review. So he's talking about the one, and there are 4 different questions that he addresses. So if we're talking about the one, what follows for the one in and of itself? What follows for the one in relation to others? What follows for the others in relation to themselves? And what follows for the others in relation to the one, a kind of return, if you will. So if we were to diagram it out, we might see the questions taking us in a bit of a circle here, where first we're looking at the one in and of itself, and then we're looking at the one in relation to others, and then others in relation to themselves, and then the others in relation to the one. There's the return. Now we saw that there are 9 hypotheses, and the first hypothesis actually transcends this whole dichotomy between the one and the others, or the many. The remaining hypotheses then would be 2 through 9, and we see there are 8 hypotheses, and we have but only 4 questions. So he breaks it down into 2 hypotheticals, if the one is and if the one is not. And that's the structure of formal dialectic, 8 questions. So if the one is, and then we can see the same 4 questions, what follows if the one is. And we saw these questions match up to hypotheses 2 through 5. And then because we're looking at the same 4 questions with the hypothetical if the one is not, it means there's a certain symmetry between hypothesis 2 and hypothesis 6, which would be the next one, 3 and 7. And we're going to see today 4 and 8 have a certain symmetry, and 5 and 9 I'll talk about next week. So here are the questions if the one is not. And we saw again that 6 is a denial of 2, because we're looking at the one in and of itself in both of those hypotheses. But in the second, we're looking at the hypothetical if the one is. We're considering the one that exists, whereas in 6, we're denying that the one exists. And so 6 is a denial of 2. And we saw that absurdities followed if you try to deny the second hypothesis. Same thing happened with 7 and 3. 7 was a denial of 3, but it turned out that there were absurdities there. So we're going to see the same here. That's the symmetry, that 8 is a denial of 4. Now just a quick reminder here that in the 4th hypothesis, we were looking at religious collectives where there's a certain appearance of the one. Now, of course, different religions have, some are more accurate than others, but they all give us a certain appearance. Even in Platonism, you're getting an appearance of the one, and it's up to you to take it beyond that. This physical realm can give us understanding at best, but it's up to us to go beyond understanding to knowing. And so if you stay within the 4th, there's a certain limitedness that you're going to experience. But what we saw when we looked at the others in relation to themselves is that there was a certain group cohesion that the one allowed. But you cannot have that. If you deny the existence of the one, you cannot have cohesion. And so what we're going to see in the 8th is that if you were to imagine a one that does not exist, then you have true materialism. Not materialism in the sense of liking expensive things, but materialism in the philosophic sense of the physical world being all that is real. And what we're going to see then is that there would absurdities would follow if that were the natural reality, if that were the actual case. As far as like if the one is not functioning, what would that mean? That's more of like a psychological effect, that if a person believes that there is no one, or there is no God, there is no upper world, if you will, we're in the cave and the cave is all that is real. If a person believes that, then they're in a state of mind of what we would call atheism. And so we're going to see what follows from that. And so that's what we're looking at here. Now, what we want to see then are the absurdities that follow, because one of the great values of the negative hypotheses is that they show us the absurdity of denying the positive ones. And so that brings us to a stronger conclusion that the one truly does exist. And so, okay, let's take a look at what he does, because there's quite a bit going on here. We can look at materialism in the philosophic sense and also the belief in materialism. So we're looking at both here. Okay, and it begins at 164b, and all of the quotes that I'm going to use are from the translator Harold North Fowler. So Parmenides says, "Let us then discuss further what happens to the other things if the one does not exist." So we're looking at the others in relation to themselves if the one does not exist. He says, well, the others must exist, for if others do not even exist, there could be no talking about the others. Now, the word for exist, the second use of it, if the others do not even exist, that's the Greek word estin. And there are a few different words in Greek for exist or to be, but estin is the word that is used to talk about the physical world. And so you might read this as saying, if the others do not have any mode of existence whatsoever, there could be no talking about them. And so it leaves open the possibility that the others do not have real existence in the highest sense, but they have some mode of existence. If we talk about the others, then the others are different. Or do you not regard the words other and different as synonymous? Now, if we're talking about the others, it means that there is some logos in the cave, and indeed the word for talk in the Greek is logos. So he's telling us that even in the cave there is a certain logos. And here he is equating or making synonymous other and different. And we say that the different is different from the different, and the other is other than the other. Then if the others are to be others, there must be something of which they will be others, which is simply, it's a kind of clumsy way of saying they must be other than something. What are they other than? So what can that be? They cannot be others of the one if the one does not exist. And so we have here a curious dilemma here, because if all we have is the one and the others, but the one doesn't exist, then what are the others other of? So here's his solution. They must be others of each other, for they have no alternative except to be others of nothing. And so you have a complete lack of unity if you don't have one. Right? That would follow metaphysically, and also psychologically we can see this happening. Well, and then it'll come up more as we go on. They are each then others of each other, but in groups, for they cannot be so one at a time if one does not exist. So you cannot have any unity. Words like unity, oneness, wholeness, these all follow from one. If you don't have one, you don't have any of those other terms either. And so you have these nondescript groups where I want to describe this psychologically as being alone in a crowd. That's the feeling of it. But even that has the feeling of one. Alone means you're one. You're by yourself, and you don't even have that. It's more like there's a group, but there's no cohesion, and there's no sense of belonging, because psychologically having oneness means a sense of belonging. You don't even have that. And from a metaphysical level, it's complete absurdity that nothing can be, nothing can exist without the one. Each mass, so notice he changed from group to mass, because groups has a set number of people and you can count the groups, 1 group, 2 group, 3 groups. But mass, we can't technically count them, but we think of it, it's more of a vague, fuzzy feeling of nondescript, unlimited magnitude, if you will. Each mass of them is unlimited in number, and even if you take what seems to be the smallest bit, it suddenly changes like something in a dream. That which seemed to be one is seen to be many. And instead of very small, it's seen to be very great in comparison to the minute fractions of it. Now, this last part after the word dream it gives us an image of looking at things at the physical level, at the molecular or cellular level. For example, take my hand. It seems to be one, but if you were to look at it at the cellular level, you would see a multitude of cells. And I don't know if it's very small, but it's small. And relative to other hands, but compared to the cells that make up the hand, it's very large compared to the minute fractions of it to the cell at the cellular level. That is one way to read the eighth hypothesis, and it's definitely there, but there is something beyond that that we need to see here, because we can talk about one hand, and so the physical realm does have a certain mode of existence, even though the one exists. We're looking at what happens if the one does not exist, and we're going to see that absurdities are going to come into it. We can also see this at the psychological level, that if you're looking at only the physical world, everything is relative. And I think what's significant here is that things are constantly in flux, and that's why it seems like things in a dream. And you have things constantly changing, and everything is relative to everything else, because we need the realm of absolutes in order to have true measurement. One is not only the principle of number, but also the principle of measurement. And if all you have are big and small, for example, in our physical world, it's always relative to something else. And so nothing is absolute. Everything is constantly changing. We're going to see this also at the psychological level, that such masses of others would be others of each other. If others exist, then the one does not exist. So there's a feeling of never belonging, nothing fits in, everything is always changing and in flux. And you can see the psychological effect of that on a person who indeed believes that the physical world is all that is real, that the world of relativity is all that is real. There are no absolutes. There will then be many masses, each of which appears to be one, but is not one, if the one does not exist. And notice throughout I've been highlighting or putting in bold words like appears and seems, because these words come up throughout the whole of the eighth hypothesis. It's all about the realm of appearance, or the world of the cave, if you will. They will seem to possess number, if each seems to be one and they are many. They seem to possess number, but they cannot, because the one does not exist. Also, another thing I want to point out here is that throughout this, the words appear or seem, they're often the Greek word phainasthai, and that's a common word for seem or appear. But another word that is often used is doxe, and doxe has the same root as the word of doxa, which is belief on the divided line. Another translation of doxe is to opine. And so we see here that for Plato, as we saw in the allegory of the cave, is that the world of appearance is also the world of belief. So even though we often talk about having knowledge and truth in our physical world, technically speaking, for Plato, if we're being very strict, you can only find true knowledge and truth in the upper world, outside of the cave. We have I don't want to say an illusion, a shadow or a reflection of that truth or knowledge. So we're in the realm of belief. Some will seem to be even and others odd. Again, you can't have even and odd without number. But all of it is unreal. There's no reality in the world of the cave. It's only the world of appearance. All will be unreal if the one does not exist. And there will, we assert, seem to be a smallest among them, but this proves to be many and great in comparison with each of the many minute fractions. So there's a repetition of what we saw earlier. I used the example of my hand before. So we see that all is relative. A whale is very large to us, but it's small compared to the ocean that it lives in. So all is relative. Each mass will be considered equal. It can't be truly equal because true equality is in the upper world, but it will be considered equal to the many minute fractions, for it could not appear to pass from greater to smaller without seeming to enter that which is between them, and hence you have the appearance of equality. Again, no absolutes, no true equality or greater or smaller in the cave. Although it has a limit in relation to another mass, it has neither beginning nor limit nor middle in relation to itself. And fortunately for us, Aristoteles does not understand this either. And he asks, why is that? Because whenever the mind conceives any of these as belonging to the masses, then another beginning appears before the beginning. Another end remains after the end. And in the middle, there are other more central middles than the middle. But they have to be smaller because it's impossible to conceive of each one of them, since the one does not exist. Again, nothing truly is there if you don't have the one. All these absurdities are what follow. And by the way, the word for mind is dianoia. I think that there is a tendency to want to read certain metaphysical words as in the highest way possible. And so you see the mind conceives of these, and some of you may be imagining mind in the higher sense, but dianoia is more of like the discursive mind. It's more of the mundane sense of the word. So this is the dianoia conceives of these. And he uses it again here. He says, so all being which is conceived by any mind, by any dianoetic mind, must, it seems to me, to be broken up into minute fractions, for it would always be conceived as a mass devoid of one. Again, you can't have any limit or boundary. It can't be a one. The mass itself is not really a one. It's just this nondescript, unlimited magnitude. Now, anything of that sort, if seen from a distance and dimly, it must appear to be one. But if seen from close at hand and with keen vision, each apparent one must prove to be unlimited in number, if it is really devoid of one and one does not exist, right? We cannot trust our senses. The sun looks like a tiny little dot in the sky because of our distance from it, right? We cannot trust our senses. Therefore, the other things must each and all appear to be unlimited and limited and one in many, if the things other than one exist and the one does not. Okay, so if this was all that there was, if we had only this world of appearance and no reality beyond it, then these are the absurdities that would follow. And will they not also appear to be like and unlike? Aristoteles asks why. Just as things in a picture, when viewed from a distance, appear to be all in one and the same condition and alike. But when you come close to them, they appear to be many and different. And because of their difference in appearance, they're different in kind and unlike each other. Reading this section, I thought of Impressionist art, maybe because of the idea of a picture was mentioned. But also Impressionist art very much captures, I think, this phenomenon of appearance. Like, for example, here's a famous Claude Monet where we can clearly see the water lilies and the bridge and so on. But if you were to hold up a magnifying glass and look at it up close, you see that he never makes any definite lines. So the groups of the other things must appear to be like and unlike themselves and each other. And also the same and different, and in contact with one another, and separated, and in all kinds of motions, and in every sort of rest. And they're coming to be, and they're perishing, and they're neither of the two. And all that sort of thing is going on here, which we can easily mention in detail if the many exist and the one does not. And so here we see all those different categories that were mentioned as absolutes in the first and second hypothesis. Here we see them in the realm of relativity and saying this is all that there would be if there were nothing beyond our physical world of appearance. And so these are the absurdities. Now, I think many artists like to play with this idea of appearance being something we cannot trust. And we saw that with the Claude Monet painting. Here's another one that I found. I like this one very much. This is a portrait by a French artist. And we can see that when we're looking at it from this angle, we can see very clearly the face of the postman and his uniform. He's even got a cigarette sticking out of his mouth. How very French. But if we were to look at it from a different angle, it loses its unity. It's just an eclectic mix of items here. So let me show you that again. You can see it from the two different angles. So playing with that idea of appearance. right. So I'd like to know what you think of the eighth hypothesis. Please leave your comments below and any questions also if you have any. As always, I would love for you to hit the like button and please subscribe if you don't already. My next video will be on the ninth hypothesis, and that will wrap up this series of videos on Plato's Parmenides. Thank you very much.